All right, welcome back to another episode of Life in the Stands podcast with Jake and Zach. We have another great show planned for today. We're going to get into some of the off-season moves that are happening around the NFL. Some really interesting stuff going on there, and then we'll also get into some of the playoff things that are and playoff implications that are happening in the NBA right now. Got about 10 games left in the NBA season, so really excited to see what kind of happens down the stretch there, and that should be an exciting time, especially in the West. So I'm excited to see kind of what our thoughts are today on that. But to start off, we'll jump right into some of the biggest NFL free agency stuff. Bender, let's talk about Aaron Rodgers and let's talk about the freaking New York Jets.
Yeah, so those are two disgusting things to talk about, considering. Considering I'm a Cowboys fan, I never liked Aaron Rodgers, so this opinion should not surprise anybody. I am not a fan of this move. I'm tired of the Aaron Rodgers
Mm,
talk and power trip. So some things that people obviously are seeing but don't think about. So he like handed them a list, I guess, of players he
hmm
wanted signed. Lazard, I guess, was one of them with Randall Cobb, Mercedes Lewis, and just randomly throws OBJ in there.
I know,
Um,
crazy.
we haven't seen OBJ play in what 2 years now. Is he really going to be the superstar wideout? Like I'm not going to sit here and doubt him, but is he really going to be the superstar wideout that he showed in the Super Bowl when he came back the first time around?
Yeah, I don't know. It's
So
hard to say. And I'll add to that too. Like the whole Rodgers list seems legitimate, kind of, because they're all like his guys. And then throwing OBJ in there just seemed like a little just like screw you to the Jets for no
yeah, so
reason.
he, so here's the catch why I'm not a fan of it. What about all those other players? That's basically a huge FU to all the players that are already there.
Yeah,
So
Garrett
you're bringing in your
Wilson, Brees Hall.
yeah, you're bringing in your own guys, and those guys are talented. Brees Hall, like, so I guess he didn't put a running back on his list, but still, I feel like it would throw him off just to see that list, be like, oh shit, like, you know.
If I'm Garrett
And
Wilson,
then
I'm pissed.
I'm mad about that. And then Moore's also there.
Yeah.
So what are you gonna do? Sign, let's say Moore, Wilson, and now you sign Lazard to whatever deal that was, and then you get Randall Cobb. If you get all the guys on that list, what Randall Cobb's your fourth receiver?
Yeah. Who plays?
Old old man Randall Cobb's not going to play over those young talented receivers,
No.
and
And he
Lazard's
shouldn't.
still probably your number two behind Wilson. Um,
Yeah.
so the other part of this is people don't like that, like myself, but I don't like the fact that it's going to like affect the mental health chemistry part of the players that are already there, like I just said. So
Yeah.
if you're Wilson, Moore, whoever it is, this is like, I don't really want to be here with the guy that's going to do all that. And now if he gets traded
Yeah.
there, you're stuck. So now I think Aaron Rodgers needs to kind of like chill out a little bit and take a back seat sometimes. Like you don't always need to be the guy in those situations. Like
Yeah.
being a low GM except NFL.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think Aaron Rodgers, even with the trade, I guess it's at a stalemate currently.
hmm Like
Um,
the Packers just want more than the Jets are willing to give up right now.
yeah, something like that.
But
So I'm just not with it. What do you think about it?
yeah, I definitely hear everything you're saying. Like I think like it's really hard to argue that Rodgers is not a prima donna, right? Like he
Yeah,
definitely is just that type of quarterback in the NFL. But I do think there's some legitimacy to him wanting a say in what's going on. Because if you look at the Packers organization and what they've done over the past 15 years while he's been there, they haven't made a lot of great decisions. Like they've let a lot of like strong organizational pieces go. And Aaron Rodgers listed out a few of them when he was on the Pat McAfee show, right? So there he went on that show, right? They do Aaron Rodgers Tuesdays and he made his announcements on and everything. But if you listen to him talk, like he does have a good point. Like the Packers watched Charles Woodson leave. They watched Clay Matthews leave. They watched Eddie Lacy leave. They watched Jordy Nelson leave. They watched Mercedes leave. Like they watched like all these guys that were just like core players. And apparently, like from Rodgers' perspective, they just either weren't offered a contract or they were just like really lowballed. So you also look at the Packers track record with drafting wide receivers and stuff like that and just like help on the offense in general. Rodgers hasn't had a lot of help like from those kinds of things going on. So 100% is a prima donna. 100% is asking for too much. And I think that list would be legitimate, at least like somewhat legitimate, if he was bringing all the guys that he's used to playing with without OBJ. OBJ just seems like a slap in the face for no reason. But I think there is also a side of this where like he's getting to the point where he's he's only going to play if he thinks he can win a championship. And he doesn't believe that the Packers organization is going to do that anymore. So before he goes to the Jets, he's like, "Hey, this is what I think is going to win us a championship."
So I have
Still
a
a prima
question.
donna, still not doing it the right
How
way, but
how far back do you think there was a debacle between the management in Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers then? Was it with the Eddie Lacy stuff? Because that's years ago. Eddie Lacy, Jordan Nelson, like Jordy Nelson, all
yeah,
them. Like, does
yeah.
it go back to that, or does it go back to the recent drafting, or just a combination of both?
I think a combination of both. And I think the only real knowledge we have of how Aaron Rodgers feels is what he said on that show on like last Tuesday or whatever it was. Right. So if those are the things that he's bringing up, he's obviously still butthurt about it. It's obviously still upsetting and frustrating to him. And that's a whole other conversation, right? Because if you want to bring back in the prima donna topic, dude, it's the NFL, it's a business. That stuff happens 5, 10 years ago. Like, move on. Um, but but I don't know. It's an interesting case. If you're just purely talking about what the Jets could be if he's there with all that firepower, like I think they're a top three favorite in the AFC. Like you got to put them up there now. Like it's Jets, Bengals, Chiefs, Bills.
All right, no. Nah, I think you're tripping with that because there's way too many good teams in that conference. Like, who, okay, who are you putting above the Jets?
The teams I just mentioned: Chiefs, Bills, Bengals.
Nothing else. You wouldn't say even like your Pittsburgh Steelers or the Ravens or any like sneaky teams coming in. Miami.
I
Miami put
mean,
together some pieces. Miami just traded for Jalen Ramsey.
yeah, they did, but Xavier Howard was one of the worst corners in the league last year. He gets talked about like he's an all-pro. He had one of the worst, like some of the worst coverage grades in the league last year. So that vaulted defense in Miami, adding a 30-something-year-old Jalen Ramsey with a $25 million contract, that might look good now in the offseason, but as soon as he doesn't play well or gets a little bit old, they're just a ton of cap space they're wasting. So I mean, like Miami's interesting, but like I'll still take the Jets over that. The Jets have a younger, more talented defense. And as far as playmakers go, if they stay healthy, I think it's about even. I wouldn't take the
I,
Chargers over them. The Chargers have so many cap problems,
Eckler's gonna leave too, probably.
and Eckler's going to leave. So, like, yeah, I mean, and even the Steelers, like, as being a Steelers fan, like, I love the offseason moves that they've made, but I know that the Steelers struggle with Aaron Rodgers. I know that AFC teams
So,
struggle with Aaron Rodgers.
so do you not think? Because I personally believe Aaron Rodgers will not be able to keep up in the AFC. So I think he's going to get beaten down in his own division because the Patriots are good enough to at least split 1-1. I think the Bills are going to push them real hard because the Bills are going to be lingering in that division. And then you got all the other teams you just mentioned. And I think, um, surprisingly enough, I have faith in the Broncos coming back after a rough season. And
Wow.
I like the Jimmy G move in Oakland. So I wouldn't sleep on teams like that. Obviously, the Chiefs are already up there, so Oakland and Denver would be fighting for
Hmm.
wild cards. But
Right.
I think there's too many teams. You might see Aaron Rodgers miss the playoffs.
Yeah, that's definitely a hot take. I think a lot of people are forgetting that he played with a broken thumb almost all of last year. Played with almost an entire rookie offensive skill group. Um, I don't know. It just feels like he's being. It's hard because there's things outside of football that he's getting disrespected for that I have no problem him getting disrespected for. But when it comes to purely the football side of it, you put him on the Jets. I think that they're a division winner, and I think they're probably a top 3, 4 seed, and they're dangerous. They're really dangerous. Um,
But guess what? It says something about a locker room when Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to take the time to build chemistry with players that are already there.
Yeah, definitely, it makes a big difference. I think Zach Wilson is still a problem there too. Like, do you remember the quote that Zach Wilson had where he was like, "If they sign a veteran quarterback, I'm gonna make that
Yeah,
dude's, I mean, to make that dude's life hell every day in practice." Like,
yeah.
I'm just trying to picture Zach Wilson like trying to talk shit to Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers being like, "Do you want to do ayahuasca?" Um, like, just like
if
it's
I'm
such a
if I'm
weird
being
relationship.
if I'm being honest with you, I don't mind Zach Wilson still being there. I think he can change. I think he'll need time, like Not saying Patrick Mahomes needed time, but he had a year behind Alex Smith. So I think Wilson might need time to just kind of sit behind Aaron Rodgers and see what happens. I'm not saying he'll come out and beat Aaron Rodgers once he gets the chance again, but I think just the knowledge side of
A-
it,
And the athletic profile is very similar.
yeah,
The athletic profile is very similar. Gunslinger mentality, and even the prima donna stuff is very similar. So, I do think there could be legitimate problems in that locker room. I think that's a good point. Um, but it is hard for me to imagine an Aaron Rodgers led Jets team not doing well. Like if you look at the Jets team last year, like their problem is that they couldn't score. As a Steelers fan, I watched every moment of their Week 18 game, hoping that they could score against Miami, just more than like 3 points. And
yep.
it was the most disgusting offense I've ever seen. Like the Jets offense last year was just horrible. It was horrible,
Hmm.
but they still won 8 or 9 games, whatever it was. Like pretty much purely because of that defense. Sauce Gardner is a number one corner in the NFL, probably. He had like the highest coverage grade in the NFL last year as a rookie. I was watching some film on him actually earlier where they were talking about in week like 4 when they played the Bills for the first time. The very first play, they ran a tendency beater against Sauce Gardner, knowing that Sauce is watching film, knowing that he knows what's coming. So anytime the Bills sent Stephon Diggs in motion last year, not once did he run a go route. Anytime he went in motion, it was some sort of quick out, some sort of 10-yard dig, 10-yard in, something short. First play of the game, Bills come out on offense against the Jets. They send Stephon Diggs in motion. They send him on a streak. It's just like the amount of respect that Sauce Gardner already commanded as a rookie is insane. Just from like a game plan perspective, from one of the top NFL offenses. Yeah, he's right. So that defense is there. Like that New York Jets defense, I do legitimately think has the pieces to be an AFC Championship caliber defense. But I think you look at what had to happen last year. They couldn't put up points. Defense had to take chances. They're out in the field a ton. But if you put Rodgers in there and you change that situation on the offensive end, I think the defense gets even better. So
Yeah.
that's why I would
I,
say like they're just a dangerous team if Rodgers go there from a pure football standpoint.
I will say I'm less excited for Aaron Rodgers and I'm more excited for the Jets because the Jets have been very bad for so long.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think the only difference between Aaron Rodgers' help on the Packers versus the Jets will be the defense. So
Hmm.
I agree with all that, but I guess we'll have to see what happens in that conference, and it'll be a little
Yeah.
bit of a shuffle per usual.
It'll be
Um,
interesting. It'll be so tragic if the Jets just still suck.
yeah,
But
for sure.
but it would be
I would
fitting.
love that. I would love that for Aaron Rodgers.
It would be like
So
it just would be very fitting. It'd be awesome.
for sure. So getting into our next little segment here, we usually do rapid fire, but today we are going to do different gradings of off-season signings and trades. So I'm
Mhm.
going to give you a move. I have a series of 8 different moves that were made, and you're going to
Okay.
give me a grade and a little description about how you're feeling if you want to.
Okay.
Um, so start here. I have Stephon Gilmore to the Dallas Cowboys.
Of course, freaking Cowboys fan asking about Stephon Gilmore first. You're
I
looking
know.
for an A grade or something like that. I'm I mean they got him really cheap. They got Stephon Gilmore really cheap. So I think for a team that's, trying to keep their Super Bowl window alive, a team that, gained some cap space by getting rid of Zeke and they have a really capable backup already there in Tony Pollard. He's a little expensive on the cap, but I think for how cheap they got him and the difference he can make, put him next to Trayvon Diggs, I think that is a more dangerous quarterback duo than Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey. And that may
I
be a
would
hot take,
agree.
but yeah, but
I would
I
agree.
think that's a better cornerback too. So I'll give it a B plus. The only reason I won't give it a pure A is because of the cap situation, just expensive, but definitely makes a lot of sense. I do like the move.
For sure. For sure. I would agree. So a weird one, in my opinion. What do you think about Jesse Bates going to Atlanta?
That one's an interesting one too. I love the fact that the Bengals lost like half their starting defense in free agency. That makes me really happy. Jesse Bates is a good player. I do think that he has overrated ball skills. I think his ball skills are not as good as people say they are. But the Falcons do have a couple of good young corners. AJ Terrell is right up there with some of the top corners in the league in man coverage. He has some
He's
great.
a dog. He is a
Yeah.
dog.
Yeah, he's really improved. In his first year, he was getting crushed. Like AJ Terrell's first year was just horrible. And he really has made some strides. So I think they're starting to piece together a pretty dangerous secondary there in Atlanta. So I do like adding Jesse Bates to that. I'll give that a B.
Fair enough. I would give that a C plus because I don't like him going to a team that's not going to compete this year. So you thought we were getting away from Dallas, but we're not. Dallas traded for Brandon Cooks. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, good old Brandon Cooks. I'll give this one an A. I'll give this one a straight up A because Brandon Cooks is an underrated receiver, especially in that like second and third receiver role. The dude just pumps out 1,000-yard seasons like hotcakes. Like it's just what he does.
No matter the
Um,
quarterback, too.
yeah, right. So you put him with Dak, you let him play behind CD, play with Michael Gallup, who's going to come back a little bit stronger, hopefully this year. People forget that the Cowboys have James Washington because he fucking busted his ass like beginning of the season, whatever, like last year, right? So that's a
Yeah,
really talented wide receiver group. I think adding Brandon Cooks to the mix is good because it's a different style of receiver than what's there as well. Really good slot and and just short spaces. So yeah, I think it's an A signing. I think he's a good addition to that wide receiver room.
I would agree because we needed wide receiver help last year, especially with Gallup out for the first half
Yep.
of the year.
Yeah, just gives you
Um,
guys more room to keep Dak on schedule because obviously he needs help. Like Dak needs good caliber receivers to do what he can do, but he does need help around him.
for sure. So I'll be nice. I'll give you a Steelers move. What do you think about Pat Pete going to the Steelers?
Yeah, that's an interesting one too. I would have liked it better if we would have re-signed Cam Sutton instead, but the Lions did give him a bag that the Steelers were not going to give him. So, backfilling that with Pat Pete, again, I can't be mad. I'd probably give it a B. Pat Pete did have one of his best seasons as a corner last year. He had like 5 picks and good bit of knockdowns, good bit of PBUs and a good coverage rating. So like I don't mind it at all. I think he does also bring a veteran presence. If the Steelers go out and draft a corner in the first round, like Joey Porter Jr. or Devin Witherspoon out of Illinois,
It'll be
then I'll
worth it,
call
I
it
think, at that point.
exactly. Then I'd call it an A because then you got Pat Pete mentoring one of those rookie corners who already has all the size and capability. Because the corner class in this year's draft is really deep. So yeah, I think like if we go out and we draft a corner at 17 or 32, A signing. If we don't, probably just a B.
That's fair. I love it. I love it for you guys. So what do you think about the Bears trading a lot for DJ Moore?
I think it's funny that the Steelers fleeced them for a second round pick for Chase Claypool um, in
For
the middle of
sure.
the season last year. I mean, that again as a Steelers fan, Omar Khan, since he's taken over as GM, has just been incredible. But yeah,
the
I
Bear
do like.
the Bears
Go
just
ahead.
love the jet sweeps too much.
They do. They do. They love the jet sweeps because I don't know if you knew Chase Claypool is the number one jet sweep runner in the NFL. Because when he came out
Wild.
of college, that's what all the scouts were saying. Um, but but yeah, the Bears. I mean, I do like it. We talked about this a little bit on a previous podcast, like kind of what we thought they'd do with the number one pick. It just didn't make any sense for them to keep it. Like they have their starting QB, they want to stick with Justin Fields. I think the only thing that I would have changed if I was the Bears, I would have held out longer because I think the closer you get to draft night, probably the more capital you receive. And I think I saw it was like it's like the second earliest the number one pick has ever been traded.
Yeah,
Um,
you could have traded
so
on draft night and make people panic into giving you more.
exactly. So I think, like it's nice for both organizations. I'll give it a B plus because it is nice because now you've made that trade and you know what to expect. You can start scouting in that way. Whereas if you keep the picks where they're at, then you scout entirely differently. You have to look at things differently. So being able to just have your plan in place at an earlier date is nice. I think that's obviously helpful, but they definitely could have gotten more if they would have held out a little bit longer. So probably like a B plus for the Panthers, but probably like a C or a C plus for the Bears.
That's fair. So next up, I would give this one an A plus 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 until Darren Waller got traded.
Uh,
So Jimmy G to the Raiders. What do you think about that move?
yeah, I do like that a lot. Yeah, he's a winning quarterback. Like there's not much else to say. Like he goes places and wins games. So you put him there with Devontae. I think that's going to be interesting. Josh Jacobs obviously had a great year. I don't understand why they traded Darren Waller, like you said.
I do.
I
I'll get
yeah.
into that in a little bit.
Um, Yeah, I don't understand that, but yeah, I mean, I'll give it I'd give it a B still because it's probably the best option they had, but it's still hard for me to imagine Jimmy G taking that Raiders team to a Super Bowl. Like if they think he's going to be their savior and he's going to be way better than Derek Carr was, like I don't know if that's the
Yeah.
case.
And I talked about
So
this in a previous podcast as well. I think the connection between Carr and Devontae, I feel like was getting in the way a little bit because they played in college together. So I think Jimmy
mhm.
G just making his basic reads will help that team,
Yeah,
and at least compete a little bit more than what they did last year.
yeah, I don't think they'll be as bad as they were last year. I think like they'll definitely win more games because Jimmy G's just not going to throw them away like Carr might. Like when the Steelers played the Raiders, like Carr threw away that game. Like he threw 3 picks that game, and he threw it away in the cold in the snow. Jimmy doesn't do the same thing in that situation. He protects the ball. So yeah, I think it's a good signing. Not anything world breaking, but it's the
Yeah.
Raiders.
Enough said.
Enough said.
So, so your boy Juju going to the Patriots, which I think
Oh,
is maybe not as big as what it might end up turning out to be, but
I think it's disgusting. Oh God, it's revolting. I mean, they let Jacoby Myers walk in free agency for the exact same contract that they signed Juju Smith-Schuster to, basically.
yeah,
Um, and I don't think that they're that different of a player. Juju's a pro. He's going to come in. He's going to produce. But I think Juju really benefited last year from having Hardman, having Tony, having Kelsey, having Scantling, having Pacheco and Mahomes.
I'd imagine the Chiefs would make another move for another receiver to help out in the middle of the year. I don't see
Yeah, I,
how
I
they
would be
don't.
surprised, right? I wouldn't be surprised if they did, unless they go draft again. But yeah, it's just hard to understand what the Patriots are expecting there. Like why not just sign Jacoby Myers back at that point? Because I don't think like not to hate on Juju because I do like the guy, but obviously he's the number one receiver. I think he's a great number two. He's a high end number two probably, but I don't think he's a number one receiver. He's not the number one receiver that's going to get you 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns. Like that's just not going to happen. I don't think. And especially if you put him on the Patriots team with like literally no one else in that receiving room, like it's going to be kind of difficult for him. And on top of that, I don't understand how Juju and Belichick are going to vibe. Like
Well,
Belichick
I think
hates
the
the kind of shit that Juju does with
honestly, I think
TikTok and social media stuff and like
Yeah,
what?
Belichick, I think will kind of crack the whip and put him in place a little bit. But I think what the Patriots lacked last year was wide receiver consistency. So I think Juju brings that. Maybe not a superstar, but I think he brings consistency as long as he's healthy.
That's true.
So that's
That's
where I
true.
stand
He
with
is
that.
he is getting the ball thrown to him by Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi though too, and that's a lot different from coming from Mahomes.
Yeah,
So yeah, we'll see. But no, I mean, not a horrible football signing, but from a like vibe standpoint, like I don't know, I just don't get it.
very weird.
Hmm.
Um, I was gonna have one more for you, but this is actually my pick for the next topic we're on. So I'll let you answer this one first, but I would like to know what the biggest signing or trade you think will make the biggest impact.
Okay. All right. Biggest signing or biggest trade. Um, I'm gonna go all the way back to the beginning of free agency. Um, and I'm gonna say Javon Hargrave going to the Niners. Um,
Yeah, it's a
and
crazy one.
I'll say that because that Niners defensive line was already crazy, right? And you add in Javon Hargrave to that, like it's going to be impossible to run the ball. If the Niners are healthy on defense, it's going to be impossible to run the ball. It is
Yeah,
like they're just going to be insane. So I think that's a move that not a lot of people are talking about because the Niners defensive line was already so good. But if they stay healthy, that defensive line is the kind of defensive line that won the Giants the Super Bowl against Brady.
for sure. And obviously, you throw almost any quarterback in that room and on that starting team, and you win
Yep.
games regardless because they know how to run the ball and they play defense.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
Shanahan's a genius, and obviously McCaffrey's there, Kittle's there, Debo's there.
Yep. Yep. Yeah,
You
you got the
got
pieces.
playmakers.
You got the pieces for sure. So yeah, Javon Hargrave. And not a lot of people are talking about that anymore, but I think it's a big deal.
So I'm actually gonna go with a sneaky pick as well, and I think it's the Darren Waller to the Giants. And I think the reason he got traded was on some petty stuff with him not
Oh,
sending the wedding invite to Josh McDaniels.
I forgot about that.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
so I
honestly
think
though,
that
like screw Josh McDaniels though too. Like
he'll
go
he'll
back
get
to
fired after
being a
this year. Watch.
go back to being a coordinator.
Yeah, he'll get fired after this year.
Yeah.
That'll happen. But I
Yeah.
think with Daniel Jones and what he did last year, they got him back, obviously. They got Saquon back along with him. Dude had over 700 rush yards by himself last year, on top of a career year with passing, and got into the
Yeah.
playoffs, won a playoff game.
Hmm.
So I think you have to look at them and say, okay, you add like an important piece, probably a top three tight end in the league when he's healthy, behind
Yep.
Kelsey and Kittle.
Yeah. And
I think the
Fryermuth.
Giants. We're gonna get onto that a different day because you're gonna piss me off. No, hell no, not over Goddard, not over Schultz. He can get there, but we're not doing all that today.
We'll see.
Screw off. So I'm not saying the Giants can go win the Super Bowl. I think the Giants need to kind of put together more pieces with their wide
Mhm.
receivers. They did get Slayton back, but I don't think
Yep.
that will be enough. I think they need to go into the draft and find something.
Yeah.
But that is my pick to make the biggest impact. I think it'll be less of a struggle for them to like put pressure on Saquon or Daniel Jones
Mhm.
anymore for their losses.
So let me ask you something like kind of in line with that. Um, Number one, do you think Saquon plays on his franchise tag? And number two, do you think Darren Waller actually stays healthy for the whole year?
I think Saquon does play on his franchise tag, and I think next year if it happens, he won't. I think he understands his injury situation. I think he is getting paid pretty well with that tag.
Yeah.
Because obviously that like if they decide to try and tag him again next year, that price bumps up as you keep tagging somebody.
Mhm.
So I think he'll probably leave after next year if they don't give him some kind of extension. And I would like to say Darren Waller is probably going to play close to 12 out of 17 games. I don't
Yeah, I
want
was
to give
gonna
him a
guess I
full
was gonna say
season.
10.
I don't give him a full season, but I think 12 is a little bit more than what he played this season.
Hmm.
So I think better than what this year was. This year was bad because it was literally
Yeah.
just Devontae Adams over there.
Yeah. And Hunter Renfro.
He missed some games too, though.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can't really put the blame on the Raiders completely. But we already
Yeah.
talked about that in the previous podcast.
Yeah. Well, moving on from those big NFL free agency and offseason items, we'll transition into a little bit of NBA stuff here now. Unless you have anything else to add, Bender, about NFL stuff, all good.
Mm-mm. I'll get on you about that Fryermuth comment
I was
eventually.
gonna, I was gonna say the only thing I've left to add is Fryermuth is
You're
top five.
right.
But yeah, anyway, going on to NBA rapid fire. So we're gonna do kind of the same thing here. Obviously we're in the middle of the season with the NBA, but we're not gonna time it. We're just gonna have a set list of questions here for Bender, and he can give his thoughts. A couple different things going on in these questions. So first one, it's being talked about a lot right now. Grizzlies have just a lot going on. Dylan Brooks can't shut his mouth, and John Morant is just struggling. Do you think the Grizzlies ever win a championship with those two on the roster?
Hell no. First of all, you got to get rid of Brooks because that's just a locker room problem, and I think it's a bad influence on Ja. So I think you get him out of there. Um, I think you need to, in the process, if you trade him because he was signed to some kind of contract a couple of years ago, I think you need to free up money with that and try and
Hmm.
bring in somebody. There was always the thought of like, let's go get Levine, let's go get like random guys like that, but they never ended up doing it. They kind of just like their young core and they do
Right.
play really hard, but I just don't think they will. Ja, I think will come back for the playoffs, though. I will say.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, don't know how that'll go. I think basketball is basketball, but I don't think they get real far. Um,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
a very competitive conference.
Yeah, for sure. The West is crazy this year. Um, Got to bring up the MVP race. Uh, I think Joel has moved into the betting favorite over the last little bit, which obviously makes both of us happy as Sixers fans.
For sure,
Um,
for sure.
who's winning it, and do you think whoever is winning it this year, Do you think they deserve it? Do you think MVP is overblown at this point? Or what's your take on what's going on with that right now?
I will say MVP is kind of overblown. I don't want to say it's taken too seriously. I like the competition, but I think Embiid deserves it this year. I think he has a better case this year than he has the last two or three. Um, but I think the timing of his performances and winning overdoes what Jokic is doing over there because Jokic has been getting fried on D, which isn't anything new, and they're
Yeah.
losing games. When you lose a game to the Spurs, people are going to look at you a little different.
Yeah. Yeah, I think winning and losing is definitely like there was a time where the records made a big difference, and now the Sixers have a better record. So, um, yeah, okay. Do you think Jalen Brown is going to stay with the Celtics?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I think
Um,
he'll stay
I
there.
will. I will always believe he's the better guy on that team than Jason Tatum, but I do think he stays.
Yeah. We're getting close to the end of the NBA season, so we're going to get all NBA teams out soon. Who do you think is going to be the biggest snub from the all NBA teams?
Biggest snub. You want me to give first team? I'm assuming first
Um,
team snub.
give a first team snub and give like all three teams, like someone who's just left off of any all NBA roster who probably should be on it.
Okay, I think off of first team is going to be whoever doesn't win MVP.
Between the
Um,
centers, yeah.
between between Jokic and Embiid. That's a pretty obvious one, but I think
Hmm.
a not so obvious one will be from the Western Conference. I think Steph will get snubbed just because he missed some time. He is going off now. Now
Mm-hmm.
that he's healthy, but I think he'll get snubbed. I still think he deserves that spot just because he is kind of carrying them into playoff positioning.
Yeah.
Whether it's play in or top six, whatever they end up getting in, because there's such a mix over there.
Right.
But yeah, off of any team, I would not be surprised if SGA gets snubbed. Um,
Really?
very overlooked from the OKC side of things. I think in the
Mm.
next coming years he'll open more eyes than what he did this year because I think that team's up and coming.
Hmm.
I think they have rising stars with Jameson Williams, and then you got Chet coming back. Um, I think the
Yeah.
oldest guy on their team's 24. So
Yeah. Crazy. Crazy. They have a really good young core there. And yeah, Shea definitely deserves more credit. It would be crazy if he got snubbed because he's like third in the league in scoring still, right? He's average over 30 a game still.
yeah, he's up there at least top five.
Yeah, crazy. Okay, last question here. Are people, speaking of the Western Conference, are people still underestimating the Kings?
Yes, and I am as well because they don't have a lot of playoff experience other than Harrison Barnes, really, in my
Hmm.
opinion, which is factual. But I think the opinion side of things is just they're not going to be ready because I don't think Fox and or Sabonis has ever been in that spotlight before.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be too much pressure. I think they can get out of the first round against a team like the Grizzlies, maybe. That's
Hmm.
about as far as I see them going.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting. They're the most clutch team in the league right now. It's different to be clutch on a Wednesday night in a, you know, non-nationally broadcasted game and like against the Pistons. Like it's a lot easier to do that when you're not playing on national TV in the playoffs, that kind of thing. But they are the most clutch team in the league so far. So it is interesting. All right, but that wraps up all those questions for Bender. So we're going to wrap up the show just by talking about which teams that are fighting for a play-in spot in the West can make the deepest run in the playoffs. Since Bender, you just answered all those questions, we'll just keep it right on rolling, and we'll just start with you. Who do you think is making the biggest run out of the play-in teams?
I think this is simple. Obviously, 6 through 10 is pretty competitive right now.
Hmm.
I think it's the Clippers if they're healthy. I also think when he first got there, Russ first got there, excuse me, people were looking at it like it wasn't going to work. And the ways they found out how to make it work are interesting to me. And I think it works better when Zubac is off the floor. I do like Zubac, so you either got to play one or the other. When Russ
Yeah.
is on the floor, I think you need to play Morris, who's like a stretch four, stretch five,
Hmm.
play small ball because the ways they are using Russ is as an offensive rebounder because they sag off so far that he has a free run to go rebound and crash. There was a game where I'm pretty sure he had close to 10, if not 10 rebounds, and like 6 or 7 of them were offensive rebounds. So I
Crazy.
think if you can find ways like that for him to be a contributor to that team, I think that's good. And he's also being used as a ball screener. So if you replace Zubac with a guard to guard screen or a screen for Kawhi, that's a mismatch. You're putting a
Yeah.
point guard on Kawhi or PG.
Right.
So
Right. Interesting. Really interesting. Yeah, I do like that. Like you said, 6 through 10 is really competitive right now. Like Suns are at 4, Clippers at 5, Warriors at 6, Mavericks 7, Timberwolves 8, Thunder 9, and Jazz 10. I mean, realistically, Mavericks, Timberwolves, Thunder, and Jazz probably are not making that deep of a run. Like maybe out of that group, I'd choose the Mavericks the most. But if I had to pick one of the playoff teams, that still includes the Warriors. So I would say my pick is probably the Warriors on that. Just because you made the comment about the Kings not having that much experience. Like if the Warriors happen to make it out of that play-in and they end up playing the Kings at the 2 seed and the Warriors are 7, like something like that. I don't know. That's a tough series to play in the first round if you're the Kings. And if it gets pushed to 6, 7 games, you probably give the credit to the experience. So I'll take the Warriors with my pick over, who can go the furthest with NBA play in teams.
yeah, don't count out the defending champs.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that'll do it for this episode of Life in the Sands podcast. We will have more NBA because obviously playoffs coming up, like we just said. And I'm going to get on Zach about that Fryermuth comment next episode because I'm tired of waiting for that. So I'm sure that'll be a heated exchange next time we meet. Thank you guys for
Yeah.
tuning in.